How's it going, everybody? I am AV Obsessed, and if you're watching this video on my channel, that means that you probably are too. And today I am doing a long-term user's review of the Marantz Cinema 30 AV receiver. Now, the Marantz Cinema 30, as of spring of 2025 and spring of 2024, which is around when it came out and when I purchased it, is the flagship AVR from Marantz. I guess if you were kind of sticking within the same group, Denon and Marantz group, the only thing that's really higher than this as far as a receiver goes would be the Denon AVR A1H, which is an absolute monstrosity of a receiver because this thing weighs in at 40 pounds, which for a receiver these days is pretty decently heavy. But the Denon A1H is a 70-pound monstrosity with 15 channels of amplification at 150 watts per channel. This unit is 11 channels of amplification is what's built in at 140 watts per channel. So pretty decent amplification. So that means that out of the box, without adding any external amplifiers, you can use this receiver to run a 7.4.4. So that's 7 ear level channels, 4 subwoofers, and 4 height channels, all just with the one AVR. And if you bring your own amplification, either in the form of really high-end, high-quality 2-channel amplification to power your front mains, if you use it like I do as kind of a hybrid 2-channel music listening system and home theater system, then you bring your own, high-quality amplification to power your front towers, and that means that 2 of the channels built into the receiver can be reassigned, so you can now do a 13-channel system, which means that you can add another set of heights, so you'll have height set 1, 2, and 3, or you can add front wides. So this receiver has 13.4 channels of processing built in, which means that if you do bring your own 2 channels of amplification, you can run either a 9.4.4 system or a 7.4.6 system, like pretty easily with this receiver. Now, taking a look at the front of the unit, it's actually funny because when these first came out, when they first released the new Marantz Cinema series, like the Cinema 70S, Cinema 60, Cinema 50, Cinema 40, and the Cinema 30, which, if you don't know, the higher the number, the lower the tier of the product. But yeah, when they first released the new Cinema series from Marantz, I actually wasn't a fan of the styling. When I was seeing it in pictures and stuff like that, I thought it didn't look all that good. But then when I saw it in person, I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. I think primarily because when I first saw it online and stuff like that, I thought that this area around here was supposed to be like a faux carbon fiber look. And when you see it in person, it's not like that at all. It's almost just like this is, it almost makes me think like it's supposed to look like it's like a hand, hammered metal kind of look where there's it's almost like wavy or wrinkly. And then the main section of the front panel here stands forward a little bit from this part, which leaves a little gap here, which they put LEDs in, which look pretty cool, I think. And they are defeatable. The LEDs there and the LED, or the light, or the backlight for the screen is defeatable. So if you have this in a home theater system and it's exposed and you want those lights all off, you can do that in the software for the receiver. But it's a very clean look. I love this like flat black like aluminum front panel here, and I don't know why, but I've always been kind of a fan of the porthole display. I know a lot of people hate it because it's so small and then it doesn't show you a whole heck of a lot, but when you buy the higher end units from Marantz, you do get the much larger display that gives you a lot more information under the door, and that also gives you a lot more buttons so that you can, like, you know, set it up and everything like that directly from that. I almost never touch any of the buttons or even the knobs on the receiver because I pretty much do everything from the app, or the IP control on my computer, which I'm going to show you later, but that, spoiler alert, is one of my favorite features about the Denon and Marantz products. But yeah, you have all of the information and the button controls that you could possibly want under the door, and you can close that door and just have this nice clean look. So for me, I think it's the best of both worlds, having a nice clean look on the front with the big door that reveals everything else underneath. So I'm a fan of this setup. One thing that I'm not a huge fan of is kind of the knob feel of the selector knob, because there is some resistance when you're turning this knob, and there's resistance and then there's detension or detent points for basically, like, every time you hit one of those detent points, then you're getting to one of the input selectors, like you're changing the input every time you hit the detent point. But there's enough resistance in the knob's rotation that you can kind of like turn the knob and leave it in between detent points, which in my opinion kind of defeats the purpose of those detention points. So I feel like they should loosen up this knob a little bit so that it rotates cleanly from one detent point to the next for when you're doing your input selection. Like I said, it's not that big of a deal because anytime I need to change the inputs, I will use the app, or I'll do something like this. Alexa, set Marantz input to aux 1. That's another one of my favorite features of the Denon and Marantz products right now, is how well integrated they are with voice assistants. You could do that with the Amazon Echo devices or the Google HomePod, or Google HomePod, that's Apple HomePod. What do they call the Google one? Google Assistant Pod, I guess. Also, a really killer feature, in my opinion, is the voice assistant control. Basically, if I'm listening to music, as soon as I'm done listening to music, I will open up my phone and pause the music because I'm using the Blue Sound Note icon to stream. And when I am done listening to music, I just go, Alexa, turn off Marantz. And it just turns off. And then also, since this unit has 3 12-volt trigger outputs on the back of it, when I tell Alexa to turn off the Marantz, it also turns off my Macintosh MC462 that I have powering my front mains, and I even have my subwoofer, the SVS SB4000, connected with the 12-volt trigger cable. So rather than just having an auto on-off based on signal sensing, it's gonna always be on when the receiver is on, and it's always gonna turn off as soon as the receiver turns off. So that's a super nice thing, the fact that I can use the voice assistant to turn on and off my system, and it'll turn off everything that is required for listening to music. So that's another one of my favorite features of the current Denon and Marantz products. Just want to give you another quick demonstration of how awesome the voice control and voice integration is when you install the HIOS skill onto an Amazon Alexa device. And I'm sure it works the same way with the Google Assistant devices, although I haven't used them. I've been using the Amazon Echo devices for years now. But let's just say you're sitting in your living room and you want to hear a particular song that just pops into your head. You could just do something like this. Alexa, play Crab Rave on Marantz.
Crab Rave by Noise Storm, playing on Marantz.
See, it just automatically clicks on. And it starts playing. And let's say it's too loud because right now I have it set so every time I turn the receiver on, it starts up at 56 volume. Alexa, set Marantz volume 30. Turns it way down so that you can listen at a quieter volume. And then if you're sick of this song, Alexa, turn off Marantz. It works that well. And it's super easy to set up. So that is one of the killer features. Now, usually when I'm listening to music, I'm using the Blue Sound Node icon because that's going to be a little bit better quality than the HIOS streamer that's built into the Marantz and Denon products here. But if you just had a song that popped into your head and you just quickly want to hear it, it still sounds pretty good over HIOS. It's not a massive difference in quality. So you can do it as much as you want. But yeah, primarily when I'm listening critically to music, I'm using the Blue Sound icon. But the HIOS integration with Alexa works pretty well. Now I just got to show you guys what I think is probably my favorite feature about the current Denon and Marantz AV receivers. So I'm just pointing the camera at my screen right now. This is my desktop on my gaming PC. And I'm just going to open up a web browser and I'm going to type in, well, I'm just going to type in 1 because it's going to be the last IP address that I searched. But this is literally every setting for the Marantz AV receiver. I can change anything in here. If I go and click on the power button, I don't know if you could hear it in my microphone, but I clicked on the power button on here and the receiver over in my living room turned on because this setup is in my dining room right now. Anything you want to do is just so easy to access. I'm actually going to enable a magnifier so that you can see a little bit better what's going on here. So you've got all the different settings. You can change literally everything in the receiver's settings here. I'm just going to go ahead and go, speaker layout. Let's see. I am using an external amplifier for my front, left, and right speakers. So this right now is set to speakers plus pre-out. It doesn't need to be set to that. It can be pre-out only. As soon as I click this, I'm gonna actually take my mic off of my shirt and kind of point it towards the receiver. As soon as I click this on my PC, you can hear the receiver click and change. It was essentially instantaneous. I'm not 100% sure if that's gonna have come through on the microphone, but anytime you change a setting in this, it changes instantly on the actual AVR. And this is great because basically, instead of having to stop the TV show or movie that you're watching, if something about the sound setup isn't right, you can just hop on your computer or even punch that IP address. This is my IP address for my receiver, but anytime you set one of these up, it's going to be slightly different. So you do, the first time you set it up, you have to look at the IP address in the network settings on the receiver itself. But once you have that IP address, anytime you want to change any setting in your receiver, you just hop in here and you can just change whatever setting you want. It's just so easy. You see, like I was talking about earlier, I have my front speakers set to full range, but if I am testing out some bookshelf speakers, I don't want to send a full range signal to those bookshelf speakers, so I can just go in here and pick a crossover level. And as soon as I click on it, it changes instantaneously on the receiver. I don't need to dig out the receiver's remote and stop whatever I'm watching, whatever TV show or movie I'm watching or song I'm listening to, and go through the menus on the receiver to change it. I just change it on my PC. And this even works on your phone. If you're sitting on your couch listening to music or watching a movie and you want to change a setting, you can pull out your phone and open up a web browser, type in, not this IP address because that's just for mine, but, whatever your IP address is for your AVR, and you can go and make whatever changes you want without even getting up from your couch, because you're probably going to have your phone on you or close to if you're sitting on your couch. And watching a movie or TV show or listening to music. So you just basically go into this menu on your phone and you could change whatever settings you want, and it changes instantaneously, and it works like pretty much flawlessly. I don't think I've ever had an issue with it. And then I can go, boop, turn off the receiver instantly, like literally instantly turns off. This is also, you can turn on and off zone 2 and zone 3 here. And like I said, literally every setting is in here and works flawlessly. So this, and I know other receiver brands have a menu system like this. When I had the Yamaha Avantage RX A6 receiver, I also did most of the setup with the web UI setup like this. But the one for Denon and Marantz is superior in my opinion. It's a more pleasing looking user interface. All the settings are like a lot easier to find and everything. Like it worked on the Yamaha one, but it wasn't as good. But I don't remember, at least when I had the Onkyo TX RZ830, I don't think that one had an online interface like this where you can change every setting. And I know for a fact that my NAD T778 didn't. Like if I went to the IP address for the NAD T778, literally I think the only option that showed up on that like IP address website for that receiver was to reset the Blue OS streamer that was built into it. Like you could basically restart it, like if it was not connecting to your network or something, like, but it didn't give you any of the options like this. So yeah, this is one of my favorite sections. And it's also extremely useful. Like let's say you had this set up in a rack in your basement and you had to the home theater in, a different room. Instead of having to point the remote for the receiver at something to try to get the settings for the receiver, you just pull out your phone or a laptop or a tablet, open up a web browser, punch in your IP address, and you can make whatever changes you need from there. So it's incredibly useful. It works so flawlessly, and I just love this setup. Now, looking at the back of the receiver, you'll notice it is a pretty full rear I/O panel here. This is actually just one of my first things that I always notice with a receiver is the ones that have a very, very full rear I/O panel. You know that they're a higher end unit. If you look around on the back of an AVR and you see like a couple HDMIs, a couple of analog ins and outs here, and then just like one row of speaker binding posts, you know that's going to be like a lower tier receiver. Seeing one like this where the whole back panel is pretty much full, instant sign that you're looking at a higher quality receiver. First thing I'll point out on this thing is you've got your row of 7 HDMI 2.1 inputs, and all of these inputs support 8K at 60 FPS or 4K at 120 FPS with auto low latency mode or ALLM and VRR or variable refresh rate. All 7 of the inputs support that, which is fantastic because when HDMI 2.1 first came out, like the first receiver that I had that supported it was a Marantz SR6015, and it was kind of a joke because only one of the HDMI inputs was an HDMI 2.1 port, and the rest of them on that receiver were HDMI 2.0. And then I believe that there were a few AVRs also that came out like a little bit later after that, like the Cinema 6015 and 7015, like that generation. Not from Marantz, but from other manufacturers like Yamaha and stuff like that, where like they had like 3 of the HDMI ports that were HDMI 2.1, and then the rest of them were 2.0s. I'm glad that we're out of that phase now, and all the HDMI ports just can do the same thing. Like they're all, I believe, 40 gigabit per second ports supporting, 4K, 120, 8K, 60, VRR, and ALLM. That's fantastic. On this side of the HDMI ports, you've got 2 coaxial digital inputs and 2 optical audio inputs. I feel like it's a little bit light on digital audio inputs. For me, it's not an issue, but I could see somebody out there having more devices that they want to connect through digital audio inputs, and there's only the 2 opticals and 2 coaxials. That's not a lot, but I think 99% of people are going to be covered. And then on this side of the HDMI ports, you've got some analog video inputs. So you got 2 composite video, which are, 480i only. And actually, this kind of gets me to one of my first major complaints about this receiver, is the fact that the older Denon and Marantz receivers, through the component video input, which is here, these 3, the Y, PB, and PR inputs, they only support 480i through the component video input. And the older Marantz and Denon AVRs could support 480p through their component video input. And for those of you who don't know, before everything was just 4K and super easy, they used to have 480i, 480p, and then 720p pretty much was the only thing that existed. I don't remember ever seeing anything that was 720i. And then there was 1080i and 1080p. And the difference between the I and the P was interlaced and progressive scan. Interlaced essentially meant that your video input, your video signal, only every other line of resolution would get refreshed every refresh cycle for that video stream. So you would have one new line, and then you'd have an old line, and then you'd have a new line, and you'd have an old line. And so it was obviously to help save on bandwidth, because the analog video signals here didn't have as much bandwidth as like the new HDMIs do. And but it basically, the picture looked a lot blurrier because of the progressive scan, or the interlaced signaling. When they came out with progressive scan signaling, essentially that meant that every single line of resolution was refreshed every time there was a refresh cycle for the video signal. And the progressive scan video signals seem to take a lot better to upscaling. So if you could feed a 480p signal into the component video input on this receiver, you would get a much cleaner, like upscaled image. So like for me, example, I still have the Nintendo Wii, and I have the component video cable for it. And if I connect the Nintendo Wii with the component video cable, if I enable 480p, I get no signal. 480i is the only thing that works now, and it just doesn't look nearly as good as it did when I had my older AVRs, where it could accept a 480p signal, and then the TV could upscale that 480p to 1080p or 4K, like depending on the TV. But yeah, I'm assuming that, they probably saved themselves $5 per unit by removing the ability to take in a 480p signal, and across tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of AVRs, that saves them a lot of money. It's just a little unfortunate, but it's still, at least it still has the component video input, although I would argue it's kind of pointless because you could do 480i through the composite video input. I've gone on long enough about that. Last thing that I would point out up here in the top row is the Ethernet port. I've actually never used the Ethernet port, even though I feel like I probably should at this point. And I'll talk about why later. And then, yeah, you got your 2 you've got your 2 Wi-Fi antennas here. And then below all that stuff, you've got the full complement of RCA preamp outputs. So you got your 4 subwoofer outs, and then you've got all your speaker outs. And then you've got zone 2 and zone 3 preamplifier outputs, because this is a 3-zone receiver. So if you're gonna have a second and third zone controlled by this receiver, you can run the preamp cables out from here to, an external amplifier to run to other zones. Or if you're only using up to 7 channels in the receiver, you can just run speaker outputs straight to your other zones as well. That's actually going to be complaint number 2, though, about this receiver. I know that obviously it would add a little bit of cost, but this receiver I feel like deserves some balanced XLR ins and outs like the Denon A1H has. I was really hoping that when they announced the Cinema 30 that it would have the balanced outputs like the A1H, because the A1H, it has 4 XLR outputs on the back, and they all say that they are subwoofer outs, but they're also assignable, and you can reassign it so that 2 of the XLR outs are your left and right front mains. So you can do 2 subwoofers with XLR cables and your left and right front mains with XLR cables. And I think that that's awesome. I would love to try out the Denon A1H one day. But I wish that they would have just put the XLR ports on this receiver as well. Yeah, just a minor complaint, but it would be really nice to have that on here. And then you've got some analog audio inputs over here too. And then you've got the antenna inputs for AM/FM antennas. And you've got your phono input with the ground lug. And then you've got 13 channels of binding post outputs. So you got 26 binding posts in total running across the entire bottom of the receiver and with the second row, which basically these are only enabled if you are using external amplification for your front mains. Then this set will turn on so that you could use that for your front wides or your height 3 output. But yeah, that is a basic look at the whole back panel of this receiver. There's a lot of stuff going on it. Oddly though, me being a gigantic nerd, I wish that there were some more things going on the back here. So you're probably thinking at this point, enough about specs and features and build quality. What does it actually sound like? Obviously, that's the most important thing, right? So I have been using this thing for a year now. I actually looked up my purchase date for this receiver on Best Buy's website, and I bought this thing on May 3rd of 2024. So it has been just a little over a year at this point. And in my living room here that is 13 by 16 feet with 8-foot ceilings, I have this receiver being the power supply or power plant, whatever you want to call it, / processor for a 9.1 home theater system, or another way you could put it is a 5.1.4 home theater system. So I'm not fully utilizing all the amplification built in. I actually was for a little while before I picked up the Rotel RB1590 and then very quickly replaced that Rotel with the Macintosh MC462. I was using this thing to bi-amp my front towers, so I actually was using all 11 channels of amplification built into this receiver for a little while. But now that I have a high-end 2-channel amplifier for the front mains, I'm actually only using 7 out of the 11 amplifier channels built into the receiver. But yeah, it is by far the best sounding receiver that I have heard to date. And I have been into home theater since, God, I want to say I was 15 years old when I bought my first home theater in a box system. It was a Sony 5.1 system that came with like an actual legitimate AV receiver. Actually, I think it might have been just an audio receiver. I don't think it had any audio video switching. I think it was just audio inputs on it, but it was a 5.1 system that came with 5 little plastic satellite speakers and an 8-inch powered subwoofer. And basically I just built from there. I started off with that system and just kept I upgraded the main speakers, I upgraded the center channel, I upgraded the subwoofer, and then eventually upgraded the surrounds, and then eventually upgraded the receiver. So it was a completely different system at that point. But since then, I have probably had, if I can just try to name as many of them as I can, I had the Sony receiver that I don't know the model of. I've had 2 or 3 Yamaha receivers. There was like, I know there was an RXV 667 in there. And then I think I had a later Yamaha receiver. And then I got the Marantz SR 5010. And then I got the NAD T778. And then I had the Yamaha RXA6A, a Vantage series receiver. And then I had the Marantz Cinema 6015. I have a Denon AVR X3500H in the bedroom right now. And then I replaced the the SR6015 with this guy. So I have had pretty much all of the big name receivers. The only thing that I really haven't had is anything from Anthem and Arcam at this point, really, as far as like big well-known receivers. And I also just remembered in that list that I don't even remember exactly which receivers this one was in between. I had the Onkyo TX RZ830 somewhere in that lineup too. The TX RZ830 was kind of the predecessor to like the RZ50. So yeah, I've had all of the major players in the past, just minus Anthem and Arcam, basically. And this one definitely sounds the best out of all of them. Like the immersion that you get from having a system like this with the 4 Atmos height channels and the surround the bed layer speakers and a really good powerful subwoofer. And I know that this is going to be a controversial take, but I actually run my front towers as a full range speaker. I don't cut them off at 80 hertz like pretty much every home theater guru will tell you. You should have all your speakers cut off at 80 hertz and route all of the bass to your subwoofers. In my situation, I don't think that that's the best way to go because of the fact that I only have one subwoofer. And I have very bass capable tower speakers here. So I run my towers full range in addition to the subwoofer, which kind of seems as though it can fill in a lot of the gaps and stuff like that you would get from only having a single sub. So yeah, that's the way I do it. If you don't like it, you can complain about it if you want, but I have never once clipped or distorted these speakers. The dual 8-inch woofers in these Cantons can play deep and loud, and they pretty well keep up with that SVS SB13, or SB4000, I should say. So the way that I have it configured, it is the most immersive and best sounding surround sound setup that I have had. There is really, really good cohesion when, say, I play video games a lot with the surround sound setup turned on, and actually I couldn't possibly not play video games without surround sound these days, because it's a game changer, like having surround on, being able to like pinpoint where somebody is. If you're like, say I've been playing the game Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and if you're walking on a trail through the woods and then suddenly someone shoots an arrow at you and they're like to the left and slightly behind you, you can pretty precisely pick out where that person is because of the surround sound. And also when I'm like walking through a village and there's a ton of people talking all around you, it's just super immersive, especially because there's so much coherence between the front stage and the rear speakers with the way that this thing handles like the crossovers and hands off the bass from the small on-wall surrounds to the subwoofer. So the coherence, like if a character is talking as I'm walking past them and they start off in this speaker and then they pan towards the back speakers, the tone doesn't really change at all. And I can hear the spatial imaging between the front speaker and the side surround speaker. Like it literally will sound like the character that I'm walking past who's talking is going, across. It doesn't just sound like it's jumping from one speaker to the next speaker. So it's incredibly immersive in that way. And then for 2-channel music as well, like for the past couple of days, even though I have this extremely high-end Macintosh 2-channel amplifier in here to power my front mains, for the past couple of days, just to reacquaint myself with what it sounds like just through the receiver, I've been listening to just the receiver again, and it sounds excellent. Obviously, there are some advantages having the Macintosh amplifier powering the front mains, but switching this thing off and just using the amplification that's built in to the AVR, I would say that the soundstage and instrument separation is better than what I've heard on other receivers, but it's not as good as when I'm listening to the Macintosh. And the bass seems a little bit slower, like less punchy, like less defined than what I get through the Macintosh. But the Macintosh is a $10,000 amplifier. This is a $4,500, essentially all-in-one box that's going to do everything that you could want it to do for a home theater setup. So I would say that the amplification that's built into this is pretty excellent for all of the stuff that Marantz is expecting this receiver to be able to do for you. So, conclusion time. What do I think after using the Marantz Cinema 30 for a year here? I think it's pretty great, but obviously there are some things that can be improved on it. I already mentioned I wish they would go back to the component video input on the back, being able to accept progressive scan signals. I wish it had the 4 XLR outs like the Denon A1H has. That would be a huge boon for someone like me who's running a high-end 2-channel amp, or if somebody were running a high-end 3-channel amp, because it would also be really cool. I don't know if you can do this with the Denon A1H because I haven't actually gotten to play with one in person, but if you could reassign 3 of those XLR ports so that it's your left, center, and right, and then you could buy a high-end 3-channel amp like a Macintosh MC303 or a Parasound Halo A31 or the Anthem. I can't remember the Anthem model number, but they have a pretty high-end 3-channel amp. Emotiva XPA3 Gen 3. Like if you were to buy a high-end 3-channel amp and you were able to use the XLR ports reassigned as left, center, and right, and then one of the XLR ports can be a subwoofer, but then it still also has the RCA outputs that could still be like completely assigned to subwoofer duty, that would be super awesome. And that would just be, I would love that. If for like the next generation, I want to see that. Or, and this could be an and/or, not and/or like the Star Wars Disney series, or they could also include something that I think would be incredible, would be a optical audio out for your front, left, and right. Could you imagine if you're a high-end audio enthusiast like I am, something that bypasses the DAC, it still goes through the volume control, kind of similar to like if you use the optical audio out on like a WIM product or a Blue Sound product, the optical audio out is volume controlled. I would love to see an optical audio out that's dedicated front, left, and right, that is volume controlled by the volume control on the receiver. And then you can run that optical out into a high-end 2-channel DAC for ultra high-end 2-channel music, or anything that you're going to run out of your front, left, and right speakers could go into a much higher quality DAC than what's built in here. Like you could go into like a resistor ladder DAC, like something from Dana Frips or something like that. That would be like the ultimate enthusiast add-on for a receiver like this, and I bet it wouldn't even be that expensive for them to implement. I mean, I'm just kind of like conjecturing right now and like, making things up that would be really cool. It's still an awesome receiver. My biggest complaint, and I think I mentioned way earlier in this video about how I've never used the Ethernet port on this thing, but I probably should, is because my biggest complaint overall, because like the other complaints that I've said are things that it doesn't have that I wish it had, but nothing really about functionality has been a complaint until this point, and that is that for some reason on a fairly regular basis, the HIOS app or the Marantz remote app just fail to connect to the receiver. And it makes no sense because there's so many times where I will try to do something with the app and it's just failing to connect no matter how much, like how many times I close and open the app and try to get it to connect to the receiver so I could like change inputs, turn it on and off, change sound mode, stuff like that. And then I'll just talk to Alexa and say like, hey Alexa, set Marantz input to AUX 1 and it'll work. So it's still, Alexa, I'm not talking to you right now.
Sorry, I thought I heard my name.
So it's still obviously connected to the network because of the fact that if I tell Alexa to do something, it'll do it. But for some reason, the app refuses to connect with my phone. This makes absolutely no sense to me. No, like being someone who's fairly techie and pretty good at networking stuff, the fact that it will connect and be, you know, operable through a voice assistant, but it will not connect to my app just blows my mind sometimes. I don't understand how that's possible. And then I used to always, the other big complaint that I have is I used to pretty much just always use HIOS for streaming music. Like the Blue Sound note icon is a recent addition to my setup. I used to always just use HIOS, and I was a big proponent / defender of HIOS because a lot of people in the hi-fi world would just basically act like you're an idiot if you used HIOS. But I never really had any problems with it until recently. Like it's probably only been like the past 5 or 6 months where I was just constantly having issues with HIOS, where the song would be playing and then it would just stop for no good reason. Also, something that was happening really commonly with HIOS is I'd be listening to a song and suddenly it was like some kind of weird digital noise or interference was getting into the signal because the song would be playing and then suddenly you would hear like a sound like in the background of the music, like just like a really loud crackling, very unpleasant and super weird, super random. And then also, and the really, really weird part is this doesn't only happen when I'm listening to music with HIOS. This thing likes to just mute itself at random. And it's not just this receiver. This used to happen with my older Marantz receivers as well. I always thought it was a HIOS issue because I'd be listening to music on HIOS and then all of a sudden I thought that it stopped because of like buffering or something like that where the song would just stop. But I always use the setting in the receiver where the mute, instead of being fully silent, it just drops the volume by 40 decibels so you can still hear it, but it's just really quiet. And part of the reason I did that is because of this random muting issue. So before I started using the negative 40 dB mute, and it was on full silent mute, I wouldn't know until I actually looked at my phone and I could see that the song is still playing. I wouldn't realize that it was muted. I thought that it just stopped working for some reason. But it'll just completely randomly, for no reason, I haven't been able to figure out any rhyme or reason to it, it'll just mute itself. And then, so I started using the Blue Sound streamer, the note icon, and it'll still do it once in a while. But it only does it when I'm listening to music. If I'm watching a TV show or a movie or playing a video game and there's a surround sound signal going through this thing, it literally never does it. But if I'm listening to music, sometimes, and it's so random too, I can go literally weeks without it doing this. And then I could be listening to music and it'll happen like 2 or 3 times within like a couple of minutes. So I 100% do not get that issue. And if somebody from Denon and Marantz sees this, or anybody knows anybody from Denon and Marantz and wants to share this video with them, I would love to get this figured out, because this is an issue that's actually been going on for years. Like the other issues that I was talking about with connectivity and that weird crackling sound coming in through the speakers, that's only happened for the past like probably 6 months. But the muting issue, I'm pretty sure, I don't think that my SR5010 had that. And in fact, the SR5010 was before they had HIOS, but the 6015 did that. And that receiver was from at least 3 or 4 years ago. I don't even remember exactly what year I got the 6015, but yeah, it's an issue that's been going on for a very long time, and it drives me crazy, especially because of the fact that it's so completely random. So this part of this video probably seems pretty negative, me talking about the issues that I have with it, but especially for surround sound duty, it's basically flawless. Like I never have any issues, never heard any weird clipping issues or crackling. HDMI ARC works basically flawlessly. Like my only complaint about the HDMI ARC is once in a great while, like literally maybe once every month, I'll turn the TV on, and that will tell the TV to turn, or tell the receiver to turn on, and it switches the input to the TV audio input, which is the HDMI ARC input, and I'll get no sound. And all I really have to do usually when that happens is just turn the receiver off, wait about 5 to 10 seconds, turn the receiver back on again, and then the sound works. As far as HDMI ARC issues go, I would say that one is pretty minimal, like pretty much not something to complain about, because I know a lot of people talk about HDMI ARC issues being like massive problems with things like not syncing up and having like a big delay between what's going on screen and the sound and stuff like that. I have never had any of those issues. The only issue I've ever had with HDMI ARC is literally maybe once a month I'll turn the TV on and then the receiver will turn on, but I'll get no sound. But it's just an easy like turn the receiver on and off and it corrects that. So no issues there. The issues that I have with this thing, most of them, if not all of them, seem like they should be able to be fixed with firmware. But I have a feeling that due to the recent financial like company problems that have been going on with Denon and Marantz, I haven't seen a firmware update for this thing in months. So hopefully they'll be able to roll out some updates to fix some of these minor issues. But yeah, every component like this has some weird issues sometimes. I would say that the ones that I'm complaining about here are on the very low side of like how annoying they are, to phrase it in a really odd way. But great receiver, great sound, love like 99% of the features. Wish that there were a couple of features that they would add to it. But yeah, if you're shopping for a receiver in this tier and you want something that can basically do it all, this is probably the receiver to get. That is pretty much going to be my conclusion. So if you guys liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you watched all the way to the end, I haven't edited this yet, but I'm guessing that this video is going to be well over a half hour long. If you watched all the way to the end, let me know, because that's going to be really interesting to see how many people actually make it this far. And also, if you made it all the way to the end, that means that you probably should subscribe, because if you could stand to stare at my face for this long, then yeah, you should probably subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one.